What is going on, guys? In this video, I'm going to show you how to rig tube baits. This tutorial is a request from one of my subscribers who bought the brand new Ace Videos tackle box. It has 6 of my favorite colored tubes there, and I'm going to show you guys 4 different methods for rigging these up. We're going to start with the most common one, which is the Texas rig. Texas rigging is the one that you want to learn first because it's weedless. I'll show you guys why. So I have here a little bullet weight. This is a 1/4 ounce. I use that for almost all my fishing. And we're just going to slide that on the line first, like so. And you can see it slides back and forth, beautiful. Then we're going to tie on our hook. I use a polymer knot. I'll put a card up in the corner there if you guys want to see how to tie a polymer knot. Also link that tutorial in the description. So there we go. We have the hook and the sinker tied on like so, and the sinker slides back and forth. This is the basic Texas rig. Now, the way you put on a tube is we'll take our tube, and first of all, you want to punch a hole right in the head of the tube. Bring it down like probably a 1/4 inch or so, and then you pop it through the top of the tube just like that. Then you're going to slide the tube all the way up like so, where the hook is sitting like that. See how it's sitting right against the tube? We're almost done. Now what you do is you're going to take, now tubes are different than like worms and stuff. A lot of times with like worms, you can just put the hook in like so and you're done. See how the hook is protected like that? But with a tube is really thick, and you're going to miss a lot of fish if you just leave it like that, if you just put the hook inside the plastic. So what I always do is I always go straight through both walls of the tube, and I actually come out the other side. See that? See how I'm like out the other side like that? And then what I do is I come back, and this is called skin hooking. Then you come back through, and you're going to take the tube and you're just going to lightly bury the hook in the skin of the tube. See how beautiful that is? And what that will do is that will cause, when a fish bites, you don't have to have that hook coming through a ton of plastic. It just has to break that skin of the tube, and bam, it'll go right in the fish's mouth. And so that's called skin hooking. Most fishermen use that now. That's extremely common because people see how if you just bury the hook inside of a tube, you're gonna get way fewer bites, or you're gonna get way fewer hookups that way. So I always skin hook it just a little bit. We have a beautifully rigged Texas rig tube. Now, if you're wondering about like size of weights used, this is a 1/4 ounce. I'll sometimes use an 1/8 of an ounce for these. That's if like there's a lot of snags. If you downsize your sinker, you'll get way fewer snags. And so sometimes I'll downsize my sinker, but for about 90% of the fishing, I usually use a 1/4 ounce or an 1/8 ounce. Sometimes if you're fishing deeper water, let's say you want to get it down to 10 feet, this size of sinker won't do the job. So most of the time I just use this one. Every once in a while, if I'm fishing really deep water, I'll use the heavier 3/8 ounce one there. But these right here cover like 99% of the tubes that you're gonna be fishing. So if you're on a budget, I would say definitely just get 1/4 ounce and 1/8 ounce and you'll be fine 90% of the time you Texas rig a tube. So now we have here, in fact, this is the way I've been rigging tubes a lot lately, are with jig heads. We have 4 different types of jig heads here. I'll actually, since we just covered the Texas rig, I'll cover this one first. This is actually a Texas rig jig head. It's the exact same concept, except you just have a small weight molded on the end of a hook there. So we'll take this tube right here, one of my favorite ones. This is it's called Snake River Craw. It has orange on the inside there. A lot of times crawdads are orange. By the way, if you just want to check out my tube tackle box, in the description, it is 6 of my favorite color tubes. I love them. Been using them since I think I first discovered Dry Creek Outfitters at the age of 14. Anyway, we're rigging it on just like the last Texas rig, except you just see it's kind of more convenient to have the jig head molded on there. And so we just slide it up just like we did before, and then the exact same principle applies. We're just going to go all the way through the hook, all the way through the tube, and then we're going to skin hook it a little bit. So there we have this exact same idea, Texas rig tube, just with a jig head. So we'll set that aside. Now here's where it's different. Here's where these jig heads come into play, because this will be a different type of application. So I'll start with the internally weighted jig head right here. Now you see it's kind of a little bit different shape than other jig heads, and it has, in fact, this is a traditional jig head right here. Let me show you guys. This here is a traditional jig head, and this one's a little bit different in that it has the eye is on a long it's on a long stem there, if you will. And that's because this is an internal tube weight. What you do is you take this jig head and you slide it into the back of a hollow tube, like so. It takes a little bit of work, but you're going to work it all the way up the tube. And once you push it all the way to the end, you see how it's inside the tube there. The hook is poking out. Let me adjust the skirt there. You see how it's almost ready. Now that's why there's a long eye on that thing, because then you take and you press down right here and watch, the eye pops through. Now you have something to tie onto right there. You'll tie onto that little eye, and that is an internally weighted tube. And one of the advantages to using an internally weighted tube over a Texas rig is that it falls in a circular pattern underwater. It's going to fall in this like circle, and you'll see it when you use it. And a lot of times you'll find, especially smallmouth will eat stuff on the fall, especially tubes. And that is why I go with this method every chance I get. I say every chance I get because sometimes you see with that exposed hook, if there's a lot of rock and weed around, I cannot use the internally weighted jig head, otherwise it's getting snagged every 5 seconds. And so anytime I can, I use this, but there are a lot of applications. If you're fishing a tube around wood and stuff, you have to go with this Texas rig here because you got to have that hook guarded. But I definitely say that get the internally weighted tube and then use that any chance you get if you're fishing around sand or a light cover, because the fall of the tube, you'll get more bites with that. This internally weighted jig head is the exact same thing. It's just really light. You see how it has a long, here's the traditional one. See how it's like the eyelet sticks out long ways there? That's just so it can poke through the tube. And then the final method, some people really like the, this is called like the darter head method, I guess you could say. A lot of different fishermen will, depending on what part of the country you're from, will call it something different, but we'll just call this like the darter head method. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take a traditional darter head. See how it looks like kind of like a bullet or something like that? I rarely use this one personally. A lot of people really like it though. I've heard on people who fish like smallmouth on Lake Erie, this is a good method. You're just going to rig the tube like so, and you're going to push the tube all the way up on the jig head. This has a different action than the internally weighted tube. When you kind of pull this through the water, it will shoot around, it'll dart around as the name suggests more. And so that is also another method if you want to try that, or if you want to like swim a tube, you can do this way as well. Probably the first way that anybody ever rigged a tube was on a jig head this way. So this one, you know, thought I'd show you guys that one. But otherwise, I almost always, if I have to have an exposed hook, I'm going for the internally weighted tube. And finally, we have here the drop shot method. Also frequent, I use this a lot when the fishing is tough. So we have here a tiny drop shot hook. This is called an octopus circle hook. Well, depending on what part of the country you're from, you'll hear different things. You can use a full-on circle hook, which looks a little bit different there, but this is an octopus circle hook, and I'm not going to get into an argument about which one is better. It depends on which fisherman you talk to. Each guy will tell you which ones. They'll have a personal opinion which one's better, but they're both extremely similar. Anyway, I have a drop shot hook here. We'll tie this on, again, using the polymer knot. If you don't know a polymer knot, it's also the strongest, besides it being necessary to tie the drop shot rig, it's also one of the strongest knots in the world, and it's kind of funny because it's also one of the easiest. So it's funny that one of the strongest knots in the world is one of the easiest. So we attach our sinker there, and then our drop shot rig is finished. This is what drop shot rig looks like. You tie your polymer knot on the hook there, and then you attach a sinker, and that keeps it up off the bottom a ways, because the sinker's always sitting up off the bottom, and then it'll keep your tube away. And that's also a good method for if there's a real snaggy area. Drop shot rigs are great for around rocky areas. So we're going to take our little octopus circle hook, and all you have to do is just hook it right through the head of the bait, like so. Boom. Like that. Make sure the hook comes through, otherwise you will miss some fish if the end of the hook is buried in. Some people get sloppy. They'll be like, oh, that's good enough right there. And no, you want to pull it all the way through There you go. So that when that fish comes over and grabs on it, he has that hook firmly in his jaw. And then what you do is just jig this along the bottom. Jig this tube along, you kind of even pull it real slowly. And like I said, a lot of times what's great about the drop shot rig is the sinker will get snagged and then the sinker breaks off and you're left with your tube. And drop shot rigs are just overall great for smallmouth and spotted bass especially. So if you're targeting smallmouth and spotted bass, and especially in like deeper water areas, the drop shot rig is fantastic. Keeps up off the bottom and just gives the tube a nice fluttering action underwater as you jig it. And the final method, which I don't use very much, in fact there's only one application where I actually use the split shot method. So to rig a tube the split shot way, we're just going to take an extra wide gap hook, just like we did with the Texas rig, and we're going to Texas rig it. The only difference between this method and the Texas rig is the sinker. All right, so we have them all rigged up Texas style there without a sinker yet, and then we're just going to go 12 to 14, maybe 15, 18 inches up the line, and we're going to attach a split shot. I always get removable split shots so you can take them off. You can add weight or subtract it as you need it, and we're just going to pinch it on the line. I actually don't have pliers with me. Normally you take pliers and pinch split shots on there, but you can also do it by hand. If you do it by hand, they're going to slide up and down, so I highly recommend taking pliers and getting it on there securely. But this is the split shot method, and I only use this sometimes I'll fish around like basically lava rock, and your tube, if your tube even gets close to the bottom, it'll get snagged. The only thing that's ever going to touch the bottom is this little sinker here, and you swim basically, you slowly pull the tube in across, like say the lava rock or the nasty weeds. And the only thing that might get snagged, it has any chance, is this little split shot here, but you kind of swim it, and it gives the tube a nice swimming action underwater and keeps it above all the nasty rocks and stuff like that. So sometimes let's pretend I have a bunch of fish hanging up in like about a foot of water, rocky water, and it's just guaranteed if you cast out across that shallow flat, you're gonna get snagged. I'll rig on a split shot method, and with this tiny sinker, or you can add maybe a couple small split shots, your chances of getting snagged go way down. And like I said, it gives the tube a nice swimming action as you pull it over rocks and weeds and stuff like that. There are other methods of rigging tubes. There's the Ned rig, there's the Carolina rig, there are a bunch of other different other more complicated ways of rigging tubes, but I rarely use those. But there are other more advanced methods out there if you want to explore those, but those 4 ways will get you by in most circumstances. Check out a link to any of the things that you saw in the description below, sinkers and hooks, stuff like that, if you want to get an up-close look, as well as check out my tackle box in the description. These are 6 of my all-time favorite tubes. In fact, I caught a great big drum on these tubes the other day. Because we have a huge drum. We have a huge drum. Well, guys, this is the first fish I've ever caught. First drum I've ever caught on Dry Creek tubes. Look at that. That's like a 2.5, 3 pound drum. Well, there you go, folks. Not only do these slay the smallmouth, but catch giant drum as well. There it is. The Old Ugly Tube catches everything. If you guys have any questions at all, please leave your comments down below and I will reply to every single comment related to tube fishing. Thank you guys so much for watching. See you in the next one.